quite a while, but for really organizations to understand what the implications of it are, it's not just a physical thing. It's not just making something disappear. And when we started looking at, as we were thinking about Digital Now last year, we reached out to some of our executives on we have an advisory board that helps us guide and shape our content and who we reach out to talk to. And we had actually a very couple suggestions that we could go talk to the Bros Group. And so when we reached out, one of the executives, Mark Dorsey, I don't know if any of you know Mark. Mark was the Ski Patrol Association, and he highly recommended Rick and Kathleen and Justin in terms of the work that they do with associations, and not just with cloud, but understanding what associations do. And so I'm going to introduce Rick to let him talk about his team here, because he's got a great team, and particularly some of the work that they're doing here in Washington.
Just to make sure you're all awake, I want to show a short video. Right? I'm old enough to remember when it was brand new, and the reason I love him is because he was a disruptive technology. You think about back then, and most of you are too young to remember this, but we didn't really have a consumer market for technology. People didn't think about having computers in their home. Personal computer was a new term, and people didn't think about really personal. What am I going to do with a computer in my home? But we've been talking about disruptive technologies today. And years ago, before he got famous, I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil used to say that love was the most misunderstood word in the English language. And I would submit to you that cloud is the second most misunderstood. So a lot of us probably feel like this personally, right? Is this how I get my data? Is this how I get my stuff? And is this the answer you get from your IT people? I don't know. So we've been doing cloud technologies for folks for about 5 years now in the association space. And I'll share some of the folks that we've been doing the work with that Don heard about and approached us about when he heard about the work that we're doing there. We do work for other industries other than the nonprofit association space, but in the managed services area, specifically in the cloud area, we do a lot of work with associations. So what we want to talk about today is what's the cloud. I want to give you some definitions, some things that you can use to talk with not only IT people, but your strategic planners, your boards. How do I really talk about the cloud in coherent ways? Because it's like love, it can mean a lot of different things, right? There's a lot of parts to the cloud, there's a lot of moving parts that we'll talk about. What's the future of the cloud? It's kind of like the question about the future of learning systems and mobile we heard earlier. I don't know where it's going to be in 5 years. 5 years ago, it didn't really exist in the form that it is now, and 5 years from now, it'll be much different. But I'm going to give you some strategies for dealing with it the way it is. What are the options? How you decide? How does it fit your overall business strategy and solutions? I didn't spend a lot of time on my resume, but I'm a business major. I wasn't an IT major. I've been in IT for 35 years, but my undergraduate work was in business and finance and human resources, right? I figured I had enough technology background, so I spent my time there. I'm also a CISSP, which is the designation for security auditor. And there's always a lot of questions about security in the cloud. So if you have those questions, I can certainly chat with you about those. How do you migrate? I'm going to talk about how do you get started with the cloud, what parts do you need to ignore, what parts do you need to embrace based on the size of your organization and what you're trying to accomplish. Future trends around AMSs and CRMs. We host, at this point, about half a dozen different AMSs and 2 or 3 different CRM systems in our cloud infrastructure. And I'll explain some more about that. How much control over your IT should you keep is always a question that comes up when we're talking about the cloud. There is very little opportunity for zero IT footprint. A lot of people think of the cloud as giving the opportunity for zero footprint there. There's a choice about whether you make it, you keep it internal or external with folks, so we'll talk about that. How much is the cloud going to impact your management policies? There are things like security that comes up. We have lots of clients who have documents and intellectual property roaming around their organization they don't necessarily want walking out the back door, and the cloud presents some unique challenges in that perspective. And what's the right level of performance and security? Just a little bit of a sales pitch about Ross Group. We're starting our 11th year. Our founder, Kathleen Connor, is in the back corner. She's with us today. Justin Kraft is our marketing director. He's in the other corner there. Justin's going to share some things with you about analytics and predictive analytics, which is another practice area for us that we spend a lot of time with. Some of the associations that we work with are actually here, some in DC, some all over the country. Pharma's here local, Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association. I think they're one of the largest associations we've dealt with. 220 million, 225 million in revenues local here in DC. Water Research Foundation is a water quality organization. They were actually our first managed services client 4 years ago. We went in and helped them with all the cloud strategies, as well as we just recently launched a project to implement Personify as their AMS system. So, and we deal with lots of different AMSs. Financial Planning Association, all the financial planners around the country, a lot of those folks are members of FPA, about 30,000 members there. Don mentioned professional ski instructors, which is Mark Dorsey and his crew. In the healthcare space, there's Creo, which is our regional healthcare information organization in Colorado, and Sisters of Charity, and various others. So I won't go through all of those, but those are just the association clients. We have others, non-association clients that we work with. We've got world-class data centers in Denver, Phoenix, and Edison, New Jersey. So when I talk about private cloud infrastructures, which I'll elaborate on in just a few minutes, that's where we host them. In one of those 3 data centers with backups across the country in those other data centers. Enterprise class ecosystem. Our model for helping folks implement cloud is to take them from commodity cloud to private cloud for the appropriate size of their organization. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but we always work on eliminating downtime. How many of you have ever dealt with systems down, whatever it is, whether it's your email system or your AMS system or your MS system? Our approach to all of this is make sure that never happens. I came out of financial services early in my career. I worked at Pricewaterhouse 3 years doing financial services consulting. We came out of an environment there where zero downtime was the objective. And now it doesn't really matter whether it's your email system or your AMS or your CRM. Nobody wants to deal with downtime. We've got people traveling, we've got people needing access to the systems 24/7. We do private cloud services fully managed, which means that we wrap ourselves around the entire infrastructure, and we do everything project services through advisory services. So, why is the cloud happening? Why now? Is a question I get often. And I use 3 benchmarks when I talk about why the cloud is possible now and it wasn't possible even 10 years ago. And I use the first metric that's really important here is bandwidth. Right? You think about now you can be connected anywhere all the time. And I don't know about, I'm sure in DC you guys have the ability to get LTE, so you're getting the same bandwidth that we used to use in a data center environment 10 years ago. You're getting on your iPhone, right? So you can download a movie today for 5 cents that in 1998 would have cost you $270. Right? So the bandwidth metric is making the fact that you're connected at high speeds anywhere all the time is probably the most significant driver in cloud adoption and why it works and why it wouldn't have worked 10 years ago or so. Moore's Law is the second function, or the second feature of what makes the cloud possible today when it wasn't possible a few years ago. Anybody know what Moore's Law is? Right, I can never quote it accurately. It's something like the power of processors increase incrementally, like 300% every 2 years, but the price falls by 50%. Some mechanics of pricing the size of semiconductors. But essentially what it means is the power of the semiconductors that come out of the electronics industry are moving faster than we can keep up with in terms of the software that we write to use it. But what it does is it makes everything that you buy today, this is important for most of the associations that we deal with, it makes anything you buy today obsolete before it gets to your door. By the time you order it from eBay or Amazon or wherever you order it, and it gets shipped to your door, it's obsolete. There's a new model coming out next week. So anything you buy today is going to be obsolete before you actually get it implemented. And one of the value propositions of the cloud is to insulate you from that. So you don't have to worry about the new stuff. But the third component of why cloud adoption is being driven so much in the industry is the talent. Finding people to manage your IT. I think we were talking earlier about $120,000 to $150,000 for a developer for mobile apps. If you multiply that by every skill set you need in IT, so you need a mobile app developer, you need somebody to manage your storage, you need somebody to manage the processor, you need somebody to manage your network. Pretty soon you get yourself up to 5, 6, 8 IT people, and they're all making $150,000 a year. You got a pretty significant talent drain in terms of how much you're spending on talent. The cloud offers you an opportunity to kind of aggregate and share those resources across a lot of organizations. So when you sit down with your board or your leadership teams, these are the questions that we most often encounter when we start doing assessment work with the associations we deal with. Is, are we doing the right things? And specifically, is IT doing the right things? Are they aligned with the organizational strategy? So what can we do to reduce cost of maintaining IT infrastructure? If you've got, how many of you have any servers inside your building, of any sort? So every one of you faces every 2 to 3 years, what do we do with that piece of equipment, right? Do we replace it? Do we outsource whatever we're doing there? How many of you have Exchange somewhere in your infrastructure? You're still running an Exchange server. I'm going to make some recommendations about that in a bit. So how do we reduce the cost of maintaining that infrastructure? I was in front of an association CEO just last week who told me that she routinely goes in and reboots the Exchange server in the morning. She does it. Why? Because that's what she has to do. It's what they have to do to keep their Exchange, their email systems running. She doesn't know why. Nobody is ever going to explain it to her. That's what she does. I didn't do it.
Something loose?
Let's see. It always happens to me. When you have a CTO title, that's what happens.
Yeah, it's sort of like an
really
It's over here. She gets it. Just
Okay, nice. Yeah. So many people. Second thing I hear from boards a lot is how do we improve operational effectiveness? And that question is usually about, am I getting everything out of the talent pool that I'm paying for? How do I make sure that I get the projects done on time? How do I get my team focused on new initiatives? I'll show you a slide in a minute that's the statistics of what happens in traditional IT, about how much they're spending their time on just keeping things running. It's significant. And how do I leverage best of breed service providers and get the service availability where it needs to be? You've heard a lot today I think Don talked about search, social, and mobile. We had a fourth component to that, collaboration. Search, social, mobile, and collaboration are kind of the 4 pillars of everything that we do when we work with associations or anyone else. When we build applications, search is the main driver for us. Whether we're accessing your existing content, I'll show you some websites in a minute, where we've gone in, so the idea of an intranet essentially is passe. Nobody thinks about an intranet in the terms that we used to think about them, because we thought about that being the 4 walls. Everybody's building portals now, right? Your content needs to show the content that's appropriate for the person that's sitting in front of it. It needs to know that that person's a member, they're not a member, right? They're a prospective member, and show them the content that's appropriate for that role that's in it. So we use search for almost everything we design in terms of content strategies for our associations. But in the social area, I know we were talking earlier from the learning management systems about Yammer and the internal systems that we build for collaboration and making sure your content is vibrant out there. Your content can be social as well. We've got organizations who are building their content so that, the typical Google for or Yammer for, if I want to be Water Research Foundation, for example, they wanted to be the Google for water research, right? They wanted everything about water quality and how you achieve water quality to be achieved through their website. That's great. So we designed a website for them where you can go and type in filtration on the search bar, and everything about filtration comes up, whether it's a webcast or a PDF or a research paper. But what we've progressed to now with the search technologies that are out there, some of them are from Microsoft, some from Google, some from others, now content is social. So, anybody use Facebook? Anybody not use Facebook? So a lot of the things you get from Facebook are because it's getting pushed to you, right? So when something happens with one of your friends or one of your connections, birthday, it's pushing to you, hey, it's their birthday, wish them happy birthday. Same concept being applied in the commercial space around content. So when content changes, say the one word example that came up earlier, one word changes and you want to know about when something changes, it pushes that information to you. So there's a lot of strategies out there for doing that. Mobile, we talked a lot about in the last session. I won't belabor that point. It is absolutely key though. More than 50% of your users are going to come to you on a mobile platform I carry 5 different devices. Right? I've got my iPhone, I've got my RT, my Surface RT, I've got my iPad, I've got my Lenovo, and there's another one in there somewhere. But I carry 5 different devices. And believe it or not, I don't have to do anything different. If I pick up this Lenovo and I start working on a document, I can move to my iPad that's sitting back in the room back there and pick up right where I left off. Same thing with my iPhone or my Surface RT. That's the power of the cloud, and that's one feature that will make your organization, your employees more productive. Collaboration is the same thing. You want to have things like Yammer and Higher Logic. Anybody use Higher Logic? Some of those tools out there for the communities that you can control what the community sees and does and how they work with each other. Some of that informal learning that we talked about earlier. You can do all of this and improve the security of your content. You can find content wherever it lives. And we talked about making content social and collaborating across boundaries. So some statistics for you around what the traditional IT organization does and the reason you ought to be thinking about the cloud. And this is from an HP executive. It's not for me, but it's a long-standing metric kind of in the business for the last 10 to 15 years, is that IT traditionally spends 80% of their time. So once you made this massive investment in IT, they spend 80% of their time maintaining, right? Just keeping the lights on, just keeping the wheels turning, keeping the lights blinking. So the concept of the cloud is to turn your 80-20 around, to make it 20-80. So they're spending 20% of their time keeping things running, and 80% of their time on strategic things, new projects, new features and functions, new websites. New collaboration platforms. You want them focused on it, and they'd much rather be working on it, frankly. Most of the IT folks that I know would rather be working on that strategic stuff than just keeping on it. Especially if they're really bought into your mission as an organization. They'd rather be adding to that. So, when you look at these things, a year ago, this is the 2014 Top 5 survey for CIOs. Last year, in 2013, the cloud was number 1. Right? So adopting the cloud. So now the top one is improving the use of data and analytics to improve business decisions. In the next session, we're going to talk about that. But all of the rest of these things kind of become a definition of how do I use it, how do I adopt the cloud to do these things. So new ways IT can support better business and marketing objectives, improving project delivery performance. All of these things are kind of a subset of the cloud. And I put check marks over there because all of those things are possible and achievable through the cloud. So what is the cloud? Anybody think they have it down pat? Because I don't. But there are some common terms that you hear. Anybody ever hear software as a service? You're probably using some of these things now. If you use Concur, for expense tracking, if you use Box.net or some of those kind of platforms, those are software as a service systems where you don't control the data, you don't know where it lives. You just know that you have a log on, and that's a software as a service that you want. It is a cloud-based service. So that's one definition. You've got another one that's Office 365, which is gaining a lot of traction these days. And I'm a big proponent of the Microsoft stack. You heard some other folks talking about Microsoft, but I think they've done one of the best jobs of integrating all of these things into it. So when I'm working on my Word document on this computer and I go back to and work on that one, I'm doing it through Office 365. Infrastructure as a service is another common term in the cloud space, and it is essentially probably not something a CEO of an organization worries about so much. They may hear the term. Infrastructure as a service is if I build something, if I want to build a SQL server, or a database server, or another Dynamics platform, or something, if I'm an IT person and I need some of that infrastructure, I can go to Amazon Web Services, I can go to Azure, and I can buy those things as a service. So it may not be something you hear a lot about as executives and associations, but it is something that somebody may come to you and say, we can go buy that infrastructure as a service platform. And these are things that they're out there. They need the same kind of management that if it was in the same four walls that you have today, your server sitting in the back room. The difference is that you don't have to replace them every 3 years, right? And usually performance is a bit of an issue, and security is a concern there too, but it does have its place. Then there are things like platform as a service. Anybody use Dynamics for CRM? So there's a platform as a service where you buy a number of licenses from Microsoft or Dynamics, and you don't care where it is because they run it all for you, and you have access to the Dynamics platform. There's some other, PeopleSoft has a platform like that. Microsoft has Project Online, Salesforce.com is another platform as a service. The idea here is that it's all the application with all the infrastructure and all the support all wrapped into one.
What would Notebook be considered? Notebook?
I'm not familiar with the product. Notebook? Familiar with the product.
Yeah, is that more of an app like this one necessarily?
It's probably an app, and if it may be attached to one of these cloud-based services. What a lot of people do is, like Office 365, it connects to Box or any of those as well as their own platform. So the last component to all this, though, is managed applications in the cloud. And a bit of a sales pitch, but this is what we do. So whether you keep your infrastructure in-house, you keep your IT staff in-house, or you outsource it, which is the old term for what managed services is, you have somebody manage all that infrastructure for you and let those folks your IT folks take care of the new projects and the new things. That's becoming a popular trend, and we've done that with every one of those organizations that you saw over. Most of them they're trying to get their IT people working on such things and let somebody else do it. We called it outsourcing and delivery. It's kind of term it's called. So I want to give you 3 terms to think about in terms of how you can slice and dice the cloud. Cloud is not one ubiquitous platform. There is no such thing as the cloud. There are, in our terms, 3 different pieces of the cloud platform that you should know about. The first is we call it commodity cloud. And these are applications, right? Who had Exchange servers? So I'm going to tell you right now today, you should get out of that business, right? Because Office 365, especially if you are in the certain C3 or C6, there are some special programs through Microsoft. You get it for like $6 a user per month or something. It's crazy to be worried about updating Exchange servers and all of that when you can buy it from Microsoft. And Microsoft spent billions of dollars building data centers to make sure that this stuff stays up and running. We've been using, as an organization, Ross has been using, they call it BPOS before they called it Office 365, was don't even know what it stands for, business platform, online service, or something like that. But we've been using that for 7 years. I think we've had 2 outages in 7 years, and neither of them were business impacted. So for those of you who are using Exchange, look very quickly at Office 365, and the migration from your current Exchange platform into Office 365 is a matter of a few minutes per user. You gotta have somebody who knows how to do it, right? So call me when you're ready, but that's an easy thing to do. And once you're there, there's no difference between running your Exchange server internally and running it in the cloud. Link, Yammer, SharePoint Online, and let's talk about those for a minute. If you get Office 365, you get the Link platform, which is their internal instant messenger. You can also link out to other trusted domains if you've got other organizations that you want to do instant messaging back and forth with. We do it a lot because we have 50 people in our organization, and we're never in the same place at the same time. You know, hopefully one of them doesn't pop up during our presentation, but somebody will link instant messaging. You know, it's an internal mechanism, so you can do instant messaging back and forth. You can do screen sharing, you can do data sharing, you can do messaging, all those things through Link, and it's part of your Office 365 package. Yammer, I know Jerry talked about earlier, Microsoft spent $1 billion buying that company 2 years ago. So Yammer is an internal enterprise social platform that allows you to do Facebook-like communications in your organization. It's inside your 4 walls. Nobody can come into it that you don't invite into it. So it's secure in that sense. But it also gives you all of those social platforms. Well, I was amazed by the statistic that got thrown up earlier about how many millennials there were going to be, and I forgot who it was who's doing it, but the organization was going to be more than 50, I guess the CPAs, be more than 50% millennials. Those people don't want to talk through instant messaging or email or those platforms. They want to be in those social platforms. So you better be thinking about those as you're moving into how the organization is going to communicate. Platforms like Yammer give you some things that you might not expect, in that it will accommodate the old schoolers like me who like to communicate by email, right? So anything that gets posted on Yammer, I can tell it to send it to me by email, and I can reply back by email. So it lets you pick which platform you want to, how you want to be communicating with. So I don't necessarily have to sit in front of Yammer all day or have it up as a link. SharePoint Online, there's kind of a couple of pieces here around SharePoint. Anybody using SharePoint today for anything? So a few of you. SharePoint's probably embedded in 80-85% of our clients. I know Pharma uses it extensively. Water Research uses it. PSI. Those folks use SharePoint, and you can have good implementations of SharePoint and bad implementations of SharePoint. If you don't, it's like anything else, if you don't have the right strategy and the right approach, you're going to have bad implementation. Most people used to just take SharePoint out of the box and try to teach somebody to learn how to use it. It's a bad strategy because it's a complex enough tool that you need some guidance on how to make it work. Most of the time you need some branding help, you need some taxonomy and governance work. It's a different metaphor. When you think about tagging documents, think about your intellectual property that you have. Every organization's got it. How many of you have file folders scattered all over? Literally in electronic file folders, not the brown file folders, but everybody's got a file folder. Where's the latest HR document? That whole thing. You can, with SharePoint, you can blow that stuff away. You just start tagging documents with HR. It doesn't matter where it lives. You can search for it through the search window on the side. So it takes a little bit of design. It takes some change management to make that stuff really successful. So, in this whole block of commodity cloud, there are other products here. I focus on the Microsoft stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's Google.
Google Docs is one of those. And they're starting to build products that are similar competitors to Link, Yammer, and the SharePoint Online. They're great products. We focus on SharePoint and on the Microsoft stack because of the integration with the documents that we build, whether it's PowerPoint or Microsoft Word. Just the integration area is easier.
Off the top of your head, are there any concerns with Google Docs in terms of privacy or security above and beyond those?
I don't think there's anything different about Google Docs than you might see here.
Okay.
For us, it's just the integration across the stack. For example, if you get one of the E licenses for Office 365, you get all the most current copies of all of the software. So like PowerPoint, Word, Excel, you don't have to buy any stuff anymore. It just comes with the license. And the nice thing that they've done with that is that it's integrated into all of the workflow and document management solutions inside of SharePoint or Yammer or whatever, and then so it's all seamless.
I just want to point out that my organization uses Google Apps for Business, which includes Gmail, Drive, their version of most of those apps you have up there.
Right.
We have no issues with security.
Great.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything different or unique about the Google Apps from what these are. The last thing in this is unified communications, and there are several platforms for this. So, like the millennials who are pushing all of the other technological envelopes here, people want to be communicated with in their own format, right? Some people want email, some people want instant messaging, some people want to get their voicemails, some people want their voicemails read to them, some people want their phones to ring on their desk, others want it to ring on their computer, others want it to ring on their cell phone. How do you accommodate all of those things? Well, that's a whole platform of unified communications. That's the terminology for that now. Again, kind of a Microsoft-centric approach. If you get into the Microsoft stack here in this commodity cloud, there's an option to accommodate all of those things through a unified communications platform. They call it Link. It's a Link extension, so that you can set your phone to ring on your computer, you can set it to ring on your cell phone, you can have it read your voicemails to you. All of those things are in this commodity cloud. And those are things you can buy by the seat. So generally speaking, everything in this commodity cloud space are things you can buy by the seat, per person, per month. You can turn it off when you don't need it. You can add new ones when you want them. In the middle space, well, let's go to the right-hand space first because it'll make it easier to explain the middle space. So moving from commodity cloud to private cloud. So if I don't want just platforms where I'm buying by the seat, and I've got things like my AMS, for example. That's a common situation where people want more control over their AMS platform, right? Maybe they don't want it to, they've got security concerns, or they're in a HIPAA compliant environment or something like that. They want to be in the cloud, but they don't want to be managing infrastructure. So there are providers like Ross that provide private cloud infrastructures. I talked earlier about 3 different data centers. We've got one in Denver, one in Redstone, and one in Phoenix. So we essentially build and run those infrastructures for our clients. So, we run their portals, their financial systems, Dynamics in a couple of cases. There's some SharePoint portals for water research and financial planning and PSIA. Those folks are running those things out of private cloud environments because they wanted that level of control, but they didn't want to do the hiring and staffing and maintenance of all that infrastructure, so we did that for them. Another space where that's common is where they're integrating the legacy systems. They're making things that you have in place that you can't move from. Financial systems are a common place here where you just can't move that. It's a loss wherever it is. And you may want to integrate those things through some kind of private cloud infrastructure. So commodity cloud on this end, private cloud on that end, but still you're not managing the HR piece of it as much as you were before. You need as many personnel, and you're not worried about replacing the equipment on a regular basis. In the middle of all this, we talked about the hybrid cloud. So how do I marry the two of these together if I need to? Or how do I marry things like single sign-on, right? All of you have applications running around out there, but every one of them has a different login. We marry those things up with single sign-on using the hybrid cloud. Excuse me, which pulls all those things together. Unified threat management is another common thing for the hybrid cloud. I won't name the organization, but somebody here in town is worried about their confidential information getting handed out to the Wall Street Journal, right? It's not an intrusion. It's not something somebody came in from the outside and got. It actually happens, and it goes out the back door with employees. So unified threat management is a platform where you can understand when people are down, so the Edward Snowden problem where stuff gets downloaded to a thumb drive, you'll know when that's happening. If somebody's downloading a bunch of data. You'll know if somebody's taken a watermark document and handed it off to somebody. So we do all of that in the unified or in the hybrid cloud. Other things like disaster recovery, not something most people have the money or resources to build a robust disaster recovery platform, but you can handle this stuff on the hybrid cloud. You can build a warm disaster recovery site that you can have up in hours using this hybrid cloud instead of days or weeks or months. We also do a lot of project work in the hybrid cloud. So I wanted to give you some kind of terms to think about here. It's not the cloud, it's the clouds. You know, like when I was a kid spinning around in the playground and merry-go-round looking up at the sky and seeing ponies and whatever. You know, there are lots of different kinds of cloud that you should understand when you're talking about. So by the numbers, what do I do? Commodity cloud, we talked about, you know, the Microsoft stack and things that you should be doing there. Think about the commodity cloud as you're going to get out of the box functionality. Right? You're pretty much going to get whatever they give you, and if that works for you, stay there. Right? The second thing you want to do is be thinking about the hybrid cloud. Where do I need to marry up that commodity cloud system? So if I go after Office 365, the next thing I'm going to be thinking about if I'm using SharePoint is, do I use SharePoint Online or use SharePoint in a private cloud project? So you've got to be thinking through those things. And mostly it's about whether I need integration to other systems, how complicated is that integration, and how big is it. For example, SharePoint Online has some limits around how much data you can actually store. Right? So if you're like water research and you've got terabytes of research information that you've kept over 25 years, you're not going to put all that in SharePoint Online. You're going to do one of two things. You're going to slice it and dice it, right, and only put the most current stuff on SharePoint Online, or you're going to do a private cloud, which is what we chose to do. And we actually married some of that for a hybrid cloud. So in the private cloud, you know, how mission critical, how secure, things like your AMS, your learning management systems, you know, whether or not you're subject to regulatory environments like HIPAA or FINRA, if you're in a financial environment, we've got folks who are in all of those. And that was some of the things that drove them to using a private cloud infrastructure. I will tell you this: there is no one size fits all strategy. Every one of them is unique. Just like you, I do tell the story, and I don't think Pharma would have a problem with me sharing it. They're a $225 million organization, but the complexity of their application stack is not as complex as Mark Dorsey and professional ski instructors, because they're not running e-commerce sites, they're not running an AMS, they're not running they've got 35 members, lots of people in those organizations. But, you know, Mark Dorsey's got 30,000 members running learning management systems and e-commerce websites and all. So size doesn't, you know, revenue is not a measure of complexity. So there is no such thing as one size fits all. If I were going into a client that was $3.5 million a year in revenue, I'd never say, oh, you're just like the other $3.5 million a year like that, because the one that I have that's $3.5 million is more complex than the other. And I know this is a busy chart, but I wanted to share with you what happens. So here's what typically happens, and you may have been through this. If you think about today, if you've got things that are on premise, you've got hardware, and you've got software, and you've got people, and you've got, you know, all of these issues around how to manage all that. Here's what typically happens. People think, what can I do to take the next step? How do I get out of managing this hardware? So traditionally, the first step has been to go from on-premise, which is all of this stuff, to what was known as co-location. Anybody know that term? So you went into a data center in our world, it's BioWest or Quest or whatever. There's lots of those out there, which really just kind of picked up your hardware and moved it to somebody's data center. Right? That's what co-location did. But that was the traditional next step, right? I want to get out of the business of worrying about power outages and the space that it takes up that I'm paying $300 a foot for or whatever. But it didn't get rid of the problem of personnel. In fact, it made it more complicated, right? Because in a lot of cases, those personnel now had to work at your location, but be at the data center on a regular basis, right? Because that's where it was. You literally just picked up the iron, as we refer to it, and put it in somebody else's place. So, that's what we did for a while, right? That people didn't have any other choice. The next step in the progression was to do infrastructure as a service. So people started offering things like Concur and Box.net and others that Dynamics now is one of those, where they're offering not only just the hardware, but they're offering the software as well in that space. And what you see is, let's take for example staffing. In the on-premise you've got a high utilization of staffing. In the cloud you've got a high utilization of staffing. When you get over here into infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, you start getting moderate to low utilization of those things. That's probably the most significant piece of what happens for you in moving to the cloud, is that you're going to redeploy your people. Okay? And your people are going to like it, whether or not. So the IT folks, when you go to them and say, hey, you're going to get, because I'm an old school IT, right? Been in this business for 35 years. I was one of those who went, the cloud thing just doesn't give you enough control. And as I spent my time really investigating that, I have actually more control, and I can go do more fun stuff. Right? So when you move from high utilization of staffing down to this low utilization, guess what they're going to be doing? They're going to be talking to you about new projects, right? They're going to be talking to you about those things that you haven't been able to get done for 2 years, because now they're going to have the time to do it, and it's going to be more fun for them. So you can just kind of run through this. There's a couple of things architecture-wise. It's hard to do all this stuff in-house, where when you get out into platform service and managed services, it gets much easier for you internally. Right? It doesn't mean it's not complicated, it just gets a lot easier for you. One significant thing is I'll show you some TCOs, some total cost of ownership models here. The CapEx OpEx utilization. Some organizations that we go into are really concerned about, am I going to spend $1 million, $2 million every 3 years to redo hardware, rebuy applications? Because that's typically the cycle. Every 3 to 5 years you're making an investment. If you move to the cloud, you're going to shift that, and I'll show you an example of that. So your capital expenditure versus your operating expenses. In the cloud, you're renting what you need. Just think of it that way. Just like renting a car at the airport. Right? You may pay a little bit more for it because you're renting it by the day, but over time you're going to pay a lot less because you don't need that car all the time. Obviously, it has impacts on your in-house staffing. Your scalability on your on-premise and your co-located stuff is very limited. In these two stacks, we talk about you're still touching the iron, right? You're still boxed somewhere, there's still blinking lights somewhere that you're having to manage. When you get over into the far right-hand side of the space, the scalability of time, meaning I can grow. If I need another incremental disk storage space or more processor or more whatever, you can add those things much more quickly. In the old days, we had to order things months ahead of time. You had to get somebody to put that in. You had to have downtime while it was being installed. Now they put that stuff in a matter of hours. Scalability we talked about. Reliability is another big feature here. Most people can't afford to. If you have an Exchange server in your environment, most of you probably don't have a redundant, high availability architecture. If that server goes down, it's down. Right? Until somebody comes in and replaces the disk drive or fixes the processor or whatever. That changes the game in the cloud. If there's a hardware failure, you never know, because it's engineered for high availability. Security and vulnerability, a big hot button for me because of my security background, is that, and I hear this all the time, how many of you have heard that the cloud is less secure than having your own environment? Everybody? I can tell you it's not true. Let me tell you why it's not true. Because every organization I run into today, so I'll just ask you this, how many of you have a dedicated security professional on your team? Nobody. You do. Okay, one. So it's rare to have a dedicated security professional in your infrastructure management team that's constantly keeping everything up to date. Because that's the key to being secure, is to make sure you're getting those footprints, those signature files, you're responding to those incidents. Most people don't have that. In the cloud side of the world, it's there, it's built into it, right? So that's why I'm telling you, it may have some vulnerabilities on paper, that seem more vulnerable than having an on-premise, but I can tell you as a practical matter, it's not. Mostly because the staff doesn't keep up with it. Portability, can I move it to someplace else? If I decide I don't like where I'm at, the provider I'm working with, or I need more space, or I need a different location, or for whatever reason I need to be portable. Once you get over into the cloud environment, especially in the private cloud environments, there's this concept called virtualization. So essentially, the machine doesn't care where it's operating. I can snapshot it in a matter of hours and have it up and running in someplace else completely different. It's no longer dependent upon the old configuration. Used to, we had to copy all the configurations around and make sure it was exactly the same way here as it was there. None of that's true anymore. So I know it's a busy slide, and we're going to put all these up on the website so you guys can have this, but this is something that gives you a discussion to have about every component of IT. And again, I've been doing this for 35 years, and these are things, if you look back at my profile, I've always had strategy in my title. So I was always the person that was doing all the financial planning and all that for IT. And these are all the things we talked about. You know, how do I control the architecture? What am I doing? How am I funding it? You know, how am I going to staff it? How am I going to make sure it's scalable? These are all the things that you should be thinking about as you make this move from whatever you have in-house to the cloud. There's one other component on top of this on the far right, and that is managed services that we talked about earlier. You can subscribe to services like ours that just kind of wrap themselves around all of this for you. So provide the staffing, we make sure it's scalable, we give you an SLA that says you're up 24/7. It's enough service. What should I be moving to the cloud? As an association, this is some work from different organizations that we've been in, and it's kind of a bubble chart that deals with whether you should be moving in the short term or the long term, and how big of an impact it's going to have in your business budget. Relatively speaking, these numbers are not things you should go put into your budget, but these are relative terms in terms of the size of something you should be doing. So let's just focus on these things down here. Email. I said to you earlier, if you're running an Exchange server, run, don't walk to your IT people and tell them to get on Office 365. They're going to hate it, probably, until they get into it and they'll figure out that it's exactly what it should be. It's a no-brainer, and I'll talk about some more of those in a minute. Intranets and portals that you're building internally, you should be moving those things quickly into the cloud, into the short term. They have a relatively low impact on your budget, and you should be looking at those pretty quickly. If you don't have a content management system already in place, it's kind of on the bubble, slightly off to the left of the bubble in terms of its budget impact. If you are building portals that are public facing and you have vibrant content that turns over a good bit, a CMS is something you should be looking at. And I recommend SharePoint. It does take a lot of planning to make sure it works right. Events is another one that lives in the short term or relatively low impact. Some of the things that we talked about earlier with mobile apps, those always come up when we talk about events. And there's some great platforms like MobileSmith that put you into this quadrant for sure about things that are going to be moving to the cloud. And when you start looking at hooking those things up to your back end, you need access to certifications to know if people are certified in certain things, and that needs to appear in the mobile app. The complexity levels that they were talking about earlier, the version files, those things will take a little bit of integration. But those platforms like MobileSmith will change the game when you're trying to build those things out for you. Moving into the longer term, workflow systems and accounting systems tend to kind of float to the longer term kinds of situations unless you're already using one of those online platforms. If you've got an incumbent system, it takes 6 months or a year to get into these newer accounting systems, mostly because of change management sort of issues, not technology issues. On the higher impacts, your learning management systems are kind of on the bubble there for us in terms of our experience. There are some newer platforms out that make that less budget impactful than they were when I did this. Your CRMs and your AMSs, we see AMS systems everywhere from a few $100,000 to $1 million. they're heavy lifts. So those have big budget impact, and you should be looking at those over the longer term. But those are long-term, long-range planning kinds of impacts anyway. You're not going to change your AMS overnight or your litigation. So defining your cloud strategy. These are the steps. First, do the no-brainers. Move your messaging and email. Not to beat a dead horse, but I'm just going to say it again. If you're in the exchange business, get out of it. Collaboration. Get your secure access to. As I said earlier, it doesn't matter to me what device I'm on. Everything I'm working on is current. Because I use OneDrive, which used to be SkyDrive. There are other platforms out there. I use all the Microsoft stack. I literally don't have any files on this computer unless, like today, I put them on there on purpose because I wasn't sure about connectivity. But literally, as long as I have connectivity, I can pick up any of those devices and I can collaborate across any of those. Get the word out. If you're not already doing social apps like HireLogic or Yammer or some of those internal social apps, do that. Because your millennials are not going to stand for it if you don't. So do the no-brainers first. Connect dots. You heard me, you've heard others talk about search, social, mobile collaboration. That's my 4 pillars, very similar to the other pillars that you've heard today. But search is the killer app. If you're not the Google for whatever domain you live in, you need to be, right? Because that's what draws people to you. And if your content is not social, if you haven't made your content vibrant enough to be able to tell somebody that it's changed or something new has happened, then you're going to be behind the curve. Utilize integrated tools. Whether you're using Google Apps or Office 365, I would stress very certainly for associations, take a strong look at one of the platforms where everything's integrated across the board. Because it will save you a lot of headaches in connectivity and collaboration and everybody talking the same language, and you just won't have the wasted effort. Pay attention to mobile and small footprint devices. We heard a lot about that in the previous session. Make sure that whatever device you pick up, I know my new iPhone's got a bigger screen on it than the one I had before. I didn't get the giant one, like the phablet thing. But the reality of that is they're going to change, right? It's how many different screen sizes are there? Probably hundreds now. But pay attention to those devices. Again, driven by the millennials, they're going to be coming at you more and more often on these mobile platforms. So you got to pay attention to those devices and make a thoughtful strategy about whether or not you're going to do mobile apps or mobile websites or responsive websites, all of those things. Capture knowledge and make it accessible. Speaks for itself. The last part of the strategy for me is I just refer to as stop watching blinkers, because I'm an old IT operations guy. I always think, Don asked the question earlier about punch cards. Yeah, I actually remember punch tape. Remember punch tape? So yeah, I remember those days when everything was a blinking light. And when I built this platform that we use across, I said to myself, we do not want to be in the business of watching blinking lights. And we don't. We build our platforms based on service providers that we aggregate for our clients. And we insulate you from all that. But we're insulated from it too. If this drive fails or a processor goes out, we don't know because we buy all that stuff as a utility. So outsource your application manager, operating systems, patches, and all that hardware management, all that touching and iron. Find a provider who can do that for you. I don't care if you call it managed services or outsourcing, whatever you want to call it, whatever language you want to use there. IT is really a utility now. IT is a service, managed services, those are all the same thing. Get out of the business of watching blinking lights and focus on service level agreements. If you engage a partner to manage your infrastructure and all of your applications, make sure you know what they're promising. Right? In all of our agreements, we have service level agreements. We tell you how long things are going to be up, when we're going to have outage windows for maintenance, those kinds of things. Make sure you understand all of that. It's something that's unique that we haven't typically thought about up to now. But now you're back into the outsourcing game again. We did it 20 years ago, believe it or not. Now we're back there. Start thinking about the service level agreements, and it'll change the game about how you manage your infrastructure. Review every IT acquisition, meaning every purchase, for is there an opportunity to go cloud? If you're spending money on a device, I don't care if it's an iPad or an iPhone or a server, that device is going to have to be replaced at some point. So you need to look at every acquisition, whether it's hardware, software, even your hiring strategies. You should look at every one of those acquisitions for opportunities. And the last thing is compute as a utility. You know, I am old enough to have been around this for a while. We were talking about compute as a utility 30 years ago. I was part of the launch of Verizon Wireless 25 years ago. Right? We called it Prime Code back then, right? It was one of the first, personal computing, whatever they called it, PCS, whatever. And we sat around in conference rooms 25 or 30 years ago, and we said, wow, wouldn't it be cool if my phone could tell me where the nearest Italian restaurant is, right? And we thought that was revolutionary back then, right? And now it just does it, right? So we're starting to see the things that we've been talking about for 20, 30 years, and it's accelerating. And the things that we were talking about 5 years ago is not possible or not possible. So step by step, I'll just walk you through one more. Find the right cloud partner. I put it over there. Don't try to do this by yourself. Whether you can engage somebody for an hour or two or a year or two, find the right partner to help you to make this transition. But it's like a lot of things, acknowledge the need for a change, right? Cloud is a game changer. Don't ignore it. If you don't take away anything else that I said to you today, don't ignore the cloud because it's not going away. It's either going to be forced on you by millennials, it's going to be forced on you by partners, you're going to embrace the cloud. How far you go into it, what pieces of it you take, in terms of your own strategies are up to you, but don't ignore it because it is a game changer. And you will find, and I'll show you some examples here in a second, about how it can change the financial picture for you. Make sure IT is working on the right things. What I mean by this is, again, kind of reminiscent of my own strategy. When I went back to school, I came into IT in the day when you didn't need a degree. Right? And so I just jumped in, both feet, started programming, and made a living. And I went back to school later in life. And when I went back to school later in life, I said, I got enough IT stuff. What I need is business background, and finance, and human resources, those things. What I mean by this is make sure that they're not focused on the right IT things. Make sure they're lined up with your business strategy. Whatever your business planning cycle is, make sure IT's at least aware of it, right? Because they can't be aligned with delivering things unless you let them know what your business strategy is. Make sure IT's doing the right things, doing things the right way. We do a lot of assessments. Don and I have worked together on a few of these. So a lot of these organizations, you saw their logos up on the wall earlier, came to us and said, we've got these IT people, we've got all this infrastructure, we don't know what to do with it, we don't speak their language, can you help us? So whether you engage us or someone else to come in and do a formal assessment to see what the alignment looks like. I mean, you wouldn't go in to try to align the front wheels on your car by yourself. You need some help with that. So get some help aligning what your IT strategy is with your business strategy. Understand the true cost of IT services. Consolidate the spend. When I first started working with associations 5 years ago, I was amazed that most of them didn't know what they were spending on IT. I mean, you would ask the number and they would give you a number. Then when you start looking around, you figure out that they don't really put IT people in their own budget, everybody's got a shadow spend. You need to really understand what you're spending on IT, because that's, generally speaking, is far more significant than you think it is. Make a plan to adopt alternative delivery models. So, again, back to what the assessment's talking about. If you understand that there are various components of the cloud, the commodity cloud, the hybrid cloud, the private cloud, if you can start slicing and dicing things, make a plan to adopt those. And the last thing is be prepared to redeploy your personnel. Again, back to what I said earlier, you're going to make this shift to the cloud, and your personnel, your IT personnel in particular, are going to be affected by it. But it's going to be a positive impact because you're going to free up resources to work on strategic. That's what they're going to do. get a partner to help you out. This is a bit of a sales pitch, accelerate your adoption, service level improvements. Let's go through that. But what I wanted to show you was this example. TCO, total cost of ownership, and IT business were big into their acronyms. So, this is an example, a real example from one of our clients, looking at their annual spend for IT, and this included their personnel, and what the cloud could do for them in terms of shifting the dynamics of what their spend looked like. And we went through this exercise because we really didn't know what it was going to do in terms of personnel. We had to get all the pieces together. So we looked at what they were spending. They had an infrastructure that was aging. In other words, most of their IT assets, they had 50 or so servers. Most of them were end of life, so they were 3 years plus in their age. So, the traditional cycle is to start replacing things every 3 to 5 years. And so we started looking at all of that, and we kind of just played out what that looked like, what they were going to have to do over the next 5 years. So in their year 0, which was the base year, they were going to spend $902,000, and $577 of it was going to be in capital expenditures to replace aging servers, mostly. Some other infrastructure components to that, but it was mostly about replacing these aging servers. Then they were going to spend $325,000 on personnel. And then in year 2, you can see how it plays out. So using the 3-year cycle, they were going to spend $135, $145, $346 to replace servers. And their OpEx, mostly around personnel, increased each year because they needed more people to keep maintaining. And these are their numbers, not ours. So, but what you see is that at the end of all of this, they were going to spend $4.6 million over 5 years. When we started building that out into the cloud, you see what happens. So their total spend over 5 years was 3.5. Projected. I'll tell you this is true because we're 2 years into this. But the numbers are. So, but look what happened in year 1 or year 0. Their capital expenditures went to almost nothing. In some organizations, this is important, right? Because you want to be buying what you need as you need it. And the idea behind this is they can turn this stuff off anytime, right? These servers and things that they're subscribed to, they have 1-year contracts. So if they decide they don't need them, they can, the size of their infrastructure can ramp down. And likewise, they can ramp up on a moment's notice. So they're going to save $1.1 million over 5 years. They're going to shift the dynamic between CapEx and OpEx and rent what they need as they need it. So these are real numbers. So it can shift the dynamic around what you're looking at financially, as well as just kind of the culture of the organization. Correct strategy at work. These are 2 examples of people that we've worked with. Just give you some of the demographics around what they are. Water Research Foundation, 1,500 or so member organizations. So every water producing entity in the United States is a member of the Water Research Foundation. They subscribe to it. And so there's thousands and thousands of members, but 1,500 institutions are their members. They have a public website. They blew away the idea of a portal, an intranet, and just went with a portal that was specific to the person who logged in, whether they're a member or a member of the public or a collaboration member. I'll show you how that works in a second. We're running their Solomon ERP. They had an AMS system called Q. I think you've never heard of that, but it's an aging AMS system that they're replacing with Personify. We do have an intranet and document management and collaboration systems we built them. So they have everything from their Office 365 implementation, we moved all their email to the cloud, and a private cloud architecture built in their data center. Financial Planning Association, hybrid cloud, public websites, public forums, microsites that we do for all their events. So we're running Great Plains. Their AMS is IMAS. You've probably heard of that. We're running their ERP system, and that's in also in Office 365. That's 2 of them. But just by way of kind of visual, this is what Water Research Foundation did to just blow away the concept of an intranet. So we want to have a portal that accommodates their federal regulations. For one thing, they're federally funded in a lot of this. So all of their data, not all of it, a lot of their data has to be publicly available. So there was really a pretty thin line between what members could get to and what the general public could get to. So we built a website for them using this cloud strategy to put a public portal out there. It was very kind of metro, Windows 8 looking, that has knowledge portals for where people can go look for anything. But if you're a member of the public, see the search bar up at the top, and you can go to this website today, waterrf.org, type in filtration or cryptosporum or whatever it is that they're looking for in the water research business, and it's going to show you all of their content, whether it's webcasts or PDFs or research or whatever, all hosted in a private cloud. Financial Planning Association, 30,000 members. This is their member portal. Lots of links into learning management systems, their profiles, and all the links to their various resources that they have in the organization. And both of these websites are SharePoint. If any of you ever used SharePoint, you wouldn't look at this and say that's a SharePoint, because we did all the user info sheet design. We want to make sure you don't end up like this. You couldn't get your head around the phone. So I hope it's been informative. I'll spend the next few minutes answering questions or making further comments, whatever you guys want to do. I know we're probably running a bit early, but that's okay. I know people want to get out of town. Any questions I can address?
So how much, when you talk about Office 365, how much of that is replacing Word, Excel, and how much of it is replacing things like Exchange servers and file sharing and that sort of thing? Or is it all of that?
It's all of that. What happens with the plans on Office 365, so you can start with a small business plan that only has, and you can buy it in its components. If you wanted to, you could buy just Exchange, right? And maybe price it so that you're getting it for $6 or $8 a month, and you can keep adding components to it. If you want to go the all-inclusive route, you get into one of the E-plans, one of the enterprise plans, E2 or E3. They're the ones that I generally recommend because with E2 you get all of the software bundled with it. So for that monthly price, you're getting copies of all the Microsoft suite of products to download on up to 5 computers per user. So for my iPad, I get a license. I get one for my RT and all the devices. So it's the pricing plans can be very complex, and there are some great guidelines online that I can send to you about what to pick if what you're interested in. But it's pretty scalable. I mean, they made it. Again, they spent billions of dollars a few years ago to build out all these data centers nationwide, and they sliced and diced a lot of the product. And they've added some new feature sets recently, things like the Azure platform. They kind of decided that you're not going to go out, unless you're a developer, you're not going to go fire up a SQL server through Azure. So what they do is they start bundling some of the products like digital rights management, content management, digital authoring platforms under the Azure content management platform. So they're starting to bundle more and more application stuff into the Azure platform. A lot of options, Everything from just, I want only SharePoint Online or only email, or any of those individual components, all the way to everything all-inclusive, including all the local content software. So, lots of options.
With cloud, you're at the mercy of your internet provider. Do you recommend a dedicated ISP with a backup, or?
We in the situations that we are involved in, it's a kind of an interesting story. I helped build the data center that we started with in Denver years ago. And the way that data center was built is we had dual engines for all the providers. So they've never had a telecom outage in the 12 years that I've been around those folks. Other data centers are different. But yes, the bandwidth is the key, as I started with kind of early on. So if it's your vulnerability, you need to build either redundancy into it or some sort of backup mechanism to make sure that you're definitely covered. Because these things, if I'm doing this PowerPoint over the internet, I gotta have a pretty good connection to make it work. Anything else I can help with?
How do folks start with the cloud?
call us. If you're starting by yourself, without somebody to guide you, pay attention to Office 365, is what I would say. Or Google Docs. I mean, I'm just not in that space, so I don't know as much about it, but I do know in the Office 365 space, if you have the right tax structure as an association, you can get some really good deals. We've got some associations that are buying Office 365 for $6 a month. So if you're starting by yourself, pay attention to that part. It can be a bit confusing, but it's worth the person.